In many cases, if you're creating a presentation for a client, they're going to provide you with some basic guidelines. But in this case, we're creating a presentation from scratch. That's why for me, the important part of the process is to create the mood board first. The mood board is like a starting point that can help you decide what colors to use, what typography, and what kind of images. Let me show you how I do it. I often work with clients that don't provide me with any brand identity. And many times I create my presentations from scratch. So it's important to create some kind of guidelines for yourself before you start designing. I'm going to show you a few examples of the existing mood boards that I made for real clients and the final result to compare. So here's our first example. There are going to be 3 mood boards that were created for a tech company that uses artificial intelligence solution to help businesses grow. So they've reached out to us to create their new brand identity, their website, and a few presentations. So I came up with these 3 directions. You can see the first of them, which I call tech, and it's purely inspired by the concept of technology. So I used a lot of color here with gradients between blue and purple. I used graphic and organic shapes, a lot of transparency, some dot elements, and I proposed to combine dark and white background across the presentation. You can see here that the layout of the information is pretty simple, but the elements that I propose using are pretty complex. In the graphs here on top, you can see that there are a lot of layers and opacity, and the whole slide might look a little complex. My next example is this one. I used black background here and big white titles with a bold typography to create contrast. I also use a little color here, again using saturated gradient, but I think the look is very different from the first one. It's, I would say, a little more young and more straightforward. This look was inspired also on a few brands like Nike, which makes it look a little more young and playful. And here's my third example. This is the softest one, and I think it looks kind of dreamy and inspired on the concept of space. I use a lot of white space here, softer gradients and colors, a little more elegant type, lots of organic shapes, and I think the whole thing looks futuristic to me. So this was the option that has been chosen by the client, and you can see the result here. These are a few slides of their presentation. So you can see how I combine blue and white background. I use mostly blue and white. There is no black here or any other color. I also added like a blurry shapes on the background to make it a little more interesting. And I think the typography is what makes it look techy and gives it this modern touch. Now I'm going to show you another example of a very different project. So this is a video production company that creates content for food brands. So you can actually see in the photo on top, both founders. And so my inspiration for these directions come purely from their Instagram account. So the woman, Kalissa, she's the one who cooks, and she has this very fun and bubbly personality. You can see it across her photos. In this first direction, I used the combination of orange and green, which by being opposite colors on the wheel creates a lot of contrast when being used together. And when I see these images, I think about juice and healthy food and smiles and fun. Next style is this one. It looks more adult and more sober. I only used green and cream colors here. And you can see the photos of the food that I used here have a lot of white space and they look very elegant and balanced. I also use simpler typography here, minimalistic design. And I kind of like this idea of outlining text and using thin lines. And here is the third direction that I called spicy. And it was inspired on the actual photo of Kalesa. I really liked the combination of pink, red, and yellow. This is the base of this style. I use a slightly more feminine typography here. High contrast images, very strong, independent, but at the same time, fun character. I think the whole mood board can be resumed to this photography of chilies in a bowl. This was actually the mood board that has been chosen by the client. So here we can see the result of their website. As you can see, it looks pretty similar to the last mood board, and it doesn't really surprise you, because the good thing about mood board is that you already know what to expect. That's why I use it a lot when I work with my clients. This way I save a lot of time and work, and normally the client would be pretty satisfied with the first version. So now that we've seen some examples of mood board and know how they look like, we're going to start creating our own. So what I usually do is to go online and look for images that will support my presentation's message. There are a couple of places where you can go. I usually use Dribbble, and you can also use Behance or Google Images or even Pinterest, any place where you can find good-looking images. So usually what I do here is to select some images that I like, and in case of GetSpace, I'm going to think about young professionals with lots of ambitions, but also concerned about their well-being. And I'm going to collect those images in a folder. I'm going to create a new folder and call it References. And I'm just going to start collecting the images. This process sometimes could take a lot of time, so don't worry, just go through any website that you use for inspiration and collect 5 to 10 images. So I'm going to show you now all the references that I found, and I'm going to go over them and tell you why I like each of them. So this first image, I found it on Dribbble. What I really like about it is the style of the illustrations. I like these outline shapes, and I also found here this element that looks a little like a window, and you can actually see the night sky in the background, which makes me think a lot about an open space. And as we're talking about space in our app, it would be nice to include this element on my slides. This next example, I think it looks very mysterious, the whole design itself. I like the combination of black background and white typography. And I also like this very bright red accent. Now this image, I saved it basically because I loved how the designer used this horizontal space. And with just a few lines, a few shapes, he created a lot of dimension in this website. So I really like that, and I think I can somehow use it on my slides too. These are the screens of some app, and I've saved them because I like how they used this person characters, and I also like the combination of black background and white background. And here's the next design. I don't really like the combination of yellow and green, but I saved it because this hand-drawn lines looks very interesting to me. They add a lot of character to the design. Here I like the combination of colors, and somehow the purple and the yellow used with black background makes me think of this concept of young and fun. Then here in this design, again, I really like purple. I really like how this round typography looks like here. I also like this gradient here and the general use of colors and these fun illustrations. You can also see the lines here, like in the previous example. And this one I saved because we basically have these two illustrations here. First one for me is the concept of productivity, and also the woman is like floating in space. And this one here is a woman meditating in the park, which is also fits a lot with our concept. Maybe I wouldn't use such soft and light colors, but I will definitely save it as a reference for my character illustrations. Now here I really like this right screen of the app, and again you can see the combination of blue or almost purple and yellow and black background or very dark blue. So I really like the simplicity of the design. And again, you can see the round typography, which I really like. So I think I'm gonna use at least this part for my mood board. Now that was a surprise for me because I found these illustrations that are exactly what I talk about in GetSpace. So you have a woman doing yoga and you have this man character who is basically juggling with graphic shapes in the space. So it's a very simple illustrations. They only use a few lines, a few shapes, but immediately it takes you to the concept of the app. I also like, again, this is a round typography, very easy to read, very simple. And you have this shape here that separates the screen in two parts, dark and light. And I also really like that. And this is just an example of a combination of yellow and purple that I think I can use too. So now I'm going to start creating my mood board with all these images and see if finally they combine together. So I'm going to do it in the document that we've set already. I'm going to use the first slide for the mood board. And by doing that, it's going to be helpful to have the mood board here because I can always go back to it and check without changing the documents. So you can take your images and just drop them all here, or you can use the method that I often use, which is to first create 8 squares. I'm pressing Option and Shift to copy them and for them to be aligned. Then I'm going to group them and make them bigger. So now if you ungroup your squares, you can just start dropping your images into them and select the part that you're going to use. This is a good way to focus only on what you need from one image. As you can see, I'm selecting the elements of each images that I like. And the purpose of the mood board is to also see if they really match together. As I said, you don't need to do it exactly like this. You can just drop your images on the slide and move them around and play around a little. This is actually the fun part of the design, so I really invite you to be creative with it. See this image? I'm going to use it twice because I want to show the style of the illustrations that I want to use. Now my mood board is ready and I can start extracting some insights from it. we need to decide what color palette we're going to be using, what typography, and visual resources. So I'm going to start with the color palette. For this, I'm going to create another 4 squares here on the side, just to see the color swatches a little bit bigger and check if they're combined with the whole mood board. So I'm going to go to Style, Fill, and select this button here, which would open the color panel. I'm going to use this tool to start selecting colors from the images. So I already know that I want to use purple and yellow. Now there is another 2 colors like this blue and green, and I'm going to check which one fits better with the general style. Okay, this green doesn't look good. If you see that you can't select the color, check if you have this circle here activated. This is better. Okay, now if I want to edit the color, make it a little darker or lighter or more saturated, I have to change and select one of these options. So here you can change the values of the red, green, and blue. I usually use this one, which is hue, saturation, and brightness. And so you can edit the color here. I'm going to make it a little darker and a little bit less saturated. And this yellow here, I'm going to use it for highlights, like this subtitle, or maybe some icons or shapes. And so I want it to be a little bit more saturated and just a little brighter. Now to save your images, you can select the shape that has the color that you want to save. You can see it here selected in the big color swatch. And so you can select it and drag it into an empty space in the gallery. This way you will always have it accessible to you. So now that I have my colors saved here, I don't need them here anymore. So I can delete the squares. And next thing I'm going to do is to select the typography. So here you can see already that we are clearly looking for a very round sans serif type. There are a few different websites that you can use to find and download typography. The most basic ones are Google Fonts or Adobe Fonts, but there are also a few more marketplaces where you can buy a little more exclusive fonts. I'm going to leave them in the additional resources too. In this case, I need something very basic, so I'm going to go to Google Fonts. I'm going to deselect all the other categories, leaving only sans serif. And I'm going to type get space here, so I can immediately pre-visualize how this font looks. Make it a little bigger, and I have all the options here. So what I'm looking for is that I want this G to be very close to the round shape. Something like this, but maybe even more. Actually, this one here looks very good. Let's see. It has a lot of options in terms of weight and the width of the stroke. Yeah, I think this is perfect. So I'm going to download the whole family and I'm going to install it on my computer.